So, Rising Storm 2. I have not seen a single person on the internet shitting on the game. It deserves it. It's not a shitty game, far from it. Quite enjoyable actually. I have sunk 140 hours into it. But, there is a strong but. What the fuck, Antimatter Games? What the fuck did you do to my beloved series? Honestly. This game is okay, but its predecessors were well above okay. And not only for me, but for other fans of the series, especially hardcore ones. But to understand why that is, and why you normies enjoying it don't know shit, we need to jump a bit back to the year 2002. So I'll take you along now for this beautiful journey of mass murder, millions of victims, war crimes and starvation. In 2002, a group of modders with a dream in Roswell, Georgia created a mod to Unreal Tournament 4. At first, they had some troubles raising the money for the project, but in 2006 they found a publisher, and so the full release under the name Red Orchestra Ostfront 1941 to 1945 was released into the Steam store. What really separated this game from all the other shooters available on the market in 2006 was the gunplay, because it had an extremely low time to kill. One shot of a rifle caliber could put you down easily, provided it was into the torso or head eyes. Most of the people on the team were riflemen, so you had a bolt act, which was, for the most part, pinpoint accurate. And even if you didn't hit, the enemy got suppressed, so he couldn't shoot you back as accurately and as effectively. So you have an environment that is just a frost Australia for the most part, where everything can kill you in a split second, and you really want to keep the distance between you and death. How do you do that? Easy, find cover, and a solid cover at that. You really want to put something in front of you and that enemy machine gunner that just spouts 1,000 rounds a minute at you. So you really need to stay in cover. But it's not that easy. First you need to get to your cover, and the movement is also, for the most part, slow and clunky, just as if you were a Soviet soldier fighting in winter against the fascist occupant. That clunkiness could be mitigated by using the sprint, but this used stamina, and without stamina you cannot keep your gun right, thus you're not effective for a while against the enemy soldiers. I know, this all seems very basic, but you need to keep in mind that this game was released in 2006 and was developed through 2002. Have you seen how games looked in 2003, for example, or 2004? None of them had levels of ingenuity close to this of Red Orchestra 1. Not even the first Arma, which is supposed to be the most accurate combat simulator, whatever, had a suppression mechanic in it. I mean, partially because it didn't need it, because it's not a competitive game, but still, this sort of realism was unprecedented at the time. So we have gunplay and we have movement. The third very important aspect of all of the three-player games from the series is the map design. And the maps were designed around choke points and attack-defense focused gameplay. One team defends, the other one attacks. You have from point A to point B to point C. So it is asymmetrical, but it is somewhat fair. You can take different approaches, and the main focus of the defenders is to hold those choke points. You're never stranded in the middle of nowhere just to be shot by a sniper from the other side of the map, from some place you didn't even know existed. It is not PUBG, it is not Fortnite, it is a competitive game with a confined map, with set points that are good for different things that you can easily memorize without much of the frustration that Battle Royale games tend to give. So to sum up what made Red Orchestra 1 so different, it is something that I call the Tripwire trifecta. Remarkably satisfying gunplay with its meaty and heavy-hitting sounds, tangible impact, and borderline orgasmic feeling that it gave you whenever you were rewarded for your accuracy with a satisfying ragdoll, a helmet flying off, or in some cases, limb dismemberment accompanied with a bloody mist left in the ear. Childhood memories. The second thing is obviously the movement, the one that made you think very carefully about your positioning and seeking cover whenever it was possible. And the third one is the choke point based asymmetrical attack defense focused yet still fair and engaging map design that rewarded ingenuity over simply rushing towards incoming enemy fire. It is important to understand that putting a change to one of these three meant the other two needed to change as well in order to fit in and adapt. Without that, there is no good and polished gameplay dynamic. Okay, so Tripwire laid off Red Orchestra for a while, up until 2011, when they released Red Orchestra 2, Heroes of Stalingrad. God, I love this game. It might just be my all-time favorite multiplayer shooter. And the reason behind it is very simple. They improved upon almost everything Red Orchestra 1 did. As it usually is in this series, all the other changes are dictated by the changes to the gunplay. So here, gunplay was quicker, snappier, and it tended to be even more accurate, even if you were using automatic weaponry. With that came the need for the movement to also be snappier and quicker. Your character no longer moved like an average American, and also whenever your stamina was depleted, he could still run, albeit at a slower pace. This meant you always had a bit more room to make errors in. No longer would you be stranded in the middle of an open field with a panting wildebeest, unable to hold his weapon straight and shoot back at the incoming fire. They also added an integrated cover system that you need to be brain dead to use. Nobody uses that because it literally exposes you. The most common weapon in the game is a bolt-action rifle, which is always pinpoint accurate, and with the cover system, you have at least 2 centimeters of your head sticking out at all times above the cover. It is possible to kill you even if you are on the same ground level as your opponent, and whenever he gets an elevation, you are just dead. Almost all the other changes were for the better, in my opinion, even including the changes to the tanking mechanics. You could no longer freely leave your tank anymore. You were glued into your seat. That forced you to take your tank very seriously. There was no plan B, nowhere to run. You didn't have your trusty Pepesha. If things went south, you were going down with the ship. The most visible change though was the one to the graphic design, made possible by the change of the graphical engine. They switched from Unreal Engine 2.5 to a modified version of Unreal Engine 3. This gave the game a new look, and God was it beautiful. Dynamic shadows, ambient occlusion, all the good stuff. In my honest opinion, 10 years later, this game still looks amazing on the ultra settings. Unreal Engine 3 also allowed for the changes to the audio design, and it was gorgeous. No longer did the machine guns, shots, and clunking of your trusty bolt-ack feel off or artificial. They all sounded real and very genuine, and with the addition of the new voice acting, you could really immerse yourself in the Eastern Front in the year of 1942. To fit the immersion, Maps were also refurbished with a new added atmosphere, and their size was adjusted to the new movement system. Also, the names were changed to fit the 1942 settings more. Danzig, for example, became apartment somewhere in Russia. But this is of course all cosmetics. The real meat and potatoes of this game map design doctrine was left unchanged. It is still choke point based fun that in its chaotic and fast-paced structure reflected the hectic nature of urban combat on the Eastern Front, at least the cinematic part of it. And cinematic reflection of the war is what Red Orchestra series has always been about. It is the kind of realism I think we all mean when we talk about shooters. You get all the action and none of the downtime Arma has plenty of. I think I have it on good authority. You don't really want to march 3 days straight, get frostbite, eat a pack of expired Tushonka rations, that is, if you are lucky of course, and then get blown to pieces by an artillery strike without even seeing a single enemy combatant in the process. Or maybe you do, I don't know, Escape from Tarkov has its audience. What I presume you really want from a game is to reenact the epic scenes from The Enemy at the Gates or Saving Private Ryan, and the Red Orchestra 2 encapsulate that feeling perfectly. Okay, so with that boring bit out of the way, let's get into the real review of Rising Storm 2. I have absolutely no idea what has happened with Tripwire or why they needed to outsource this project partially to Antimatter Games. I also do not care. They sold this game for real money and real judgment they will receive. For starters, let's name all the things Rising Storm 2 actually does better than its predecessors so as not to be too harsh from the very beginning. First of all, more customization to your character has been added. You can now choose your helmet decals or you can get some cosmetic unlocks as you level up. It is pretty cool, but an effort that went into this fairly well implemented feature could have gone to general polish that the game obviously lacks. The fact that this is the only feature implemented perfectly, and coincidentally the only one they monetized later on with the addition of cosmetic pack DLCs, speaks volumes about Antimatter's priorities at the time. Needless to say, it was not the customers. Secondly, helicopters. The flight model is fairly solid for all 3 of the choppers present in the game, that is 2 differently flavored Hueys, a Loach and a Cobra. Flight sim fans can even do what they do best, which is to make their life miserable and harder, now with the help of the advanced flight model. I frankly do not feel much of a difference between the simple and advanced one, but I have not spent that much time in the helicopters. Primary reason behind that being the fact that you cannot easily play with joystick. Maybe there is a way to do it, but I am not willing to spend a day ghettoing my way to maybe be able to fly just a bit more comfortably. Helicopters, while implemented well, they did come at the price of armored warfare, not as an addition to it. I personally do not like this because I'm a big sucker for vehicular combat in general, but I do not see this change as a bad one necessarily. I will gladly take a somewhat well-implemented combat dynamic based around helicopters only than half-baked tanks that render the game unplayable. It would still be cool to drive a T-55 or a Patton though. Furthermore, there are now player-made squads. This is a genuinely great addition, as you can now have an easier time playing and coordinating with your friends. In Red Orchestra 2, I think they tried to simulate the constant waves of Soviet troops frantically defending their motherland, seeing how half of the team could spawn on one guy camping somewhere in the corner. Here, it represents how soldiers would detach from their original squads once a serious fight broke out in the jungle, confusing many. Another great and needed in this instance change was aiming down sights with an LMG when it is not deployed. This, I think, is a very significant addition which saves the MG gunner from being redundant. Since everyone and their wife has an automatic rifle now, not giving your MG gunner the ability to use his weapon as a heavy assault rifle would make people avoid this class. And it still holds a crucial role, since without effective suppression, there can neither be a successful attack nor defense. The attachable bayonet is also back. My tip is that you should always attach it when possible. It reduces recoil. So those differences I like, even though some of them have their downsides. All the actually serious changes, though, were in their entirety horribly realized ideas crafted in the depths of hell itself, so their implementation would torment me until a new Red Orchestra game is released, so probably until the very end of my miserable life. And I believe Antimatter Games is to be held accountable for all of that. But let me explain my frustration here. When the beta launched, everything was more or less one shot, one kill, with differences showing mostly on distances exceeding 100 meters. It worked well and had the spirit of the first Rising Storm game. Then, around 2018, something has changed, and Antimatter Games fucked up big time when they started quote-unquote balancing the game. Now, a 5.56 NATO and 7.62 NATO did this same exact amount of damage. I remember 8th grade level physics well enough to prove to you mathematically why this is absolute malarkey. But I don't have to. Gameplay wise, if you get to choose between a slower fire output and a faster fire output, you always choose the faster one if they do the exact same damage per hit. They literally cucked a whole playstyle in the name of balance. They later retconned some of this, but to this day it remains ridiculously inconsistent. AKM is stupidly underpowered too. Looking at its cartridge, it should have damage comparable to the L1A1 and the M14 maybe. Yet this absurdly huge bullet that makes this weapon hard to control in full auto makes less instant damage per hit than a 5.56 NATO shot from an M16, which is also incomparably more accurate and controllable than this steaming pile of garbage. The Vietnamese AK mods are even worse, packing even less damage than the AKM. Well, yes, they use the same ammo, but you see, its rate of fire is slightly faster than the Soviet one. It is only fair that you do less damage per hit, so our customers in the USA can live their power fantasy of not losing that war. You also have other stupidities like the M1 Garand being more powerful and straight up better performing than the M14. This is not only due to the schizophrenic balancing method, but also because of the prolonged reload times across the board compared to Arrow 2. All of the weapons suffer from this, but it really shows whenever you don't empty your M14. I advise you do that, because if you don't, your literal buffoon will first ponderously try his best not to drop a clip with his greasy American fingers, then he will fondle around, then, when he's finally done, you still end up with the magazine half empty. Then if you decide to reload once more, and only then will he try his best not to faint from the sheer effort that is changing the magazine. Meanwhile, the Chad Southern Vietnamese soldier will just rock the lever back, put a fresh clip in, and it will not take him eons to pose a threat again, making the Garand the better choice out of the two. You might be thinking that I'm over-exaggerating a bit. And to that I say, yes I am. Reloading is just not that much of an issue, because you receive so little ammo, there is just not that many occasions in which you actually get to reload so often that it gets annoying. All you get is 120 rounds, and that's it. You cannot hold more than that at any given time. And sure, it is not as big of a problem when your rifle is semi-automatic. Even if it isn't, you can say, that's no biggie, I will just go to the ammo cache after those 20 seconds of shooting my SMG non-stop and I will resupply. And you know what? that is exactly where you would be wrong. Your movement speed is no longer snappy and responsive. At times it feels as if you were controlling a crippled dwarf compared to the previous series installments. On top of making your character move slower, they also scaled the maps up, so you have more ground to hike on, with your backpack filled with fully loaded magazines. You took one, right? Yeah, ironically enough, if you look at those trailers, all of the soldiers had backpacks modeled, which made them very, very visible, especially at longer distances. Fortunately, they are nowhere to be found now, at least on the American soldiers, where that issue was bigger pain in the butt. In the first Red Orchestra, the clumsiness of your character was not that big of a deal since there was plenty of cover. And while you had to watch your step, obviously, you could clearly differentiate when you got unlucky and when you did something stupid and should reconsider your positioning next time. This is no longer the case in this title. Here, even though the maps are essentially jungle reskins of RO2 classics, Antimatter has still somehow managed to fuck it up. I think in an effort to make maps bigger for whatever reason, they added a variety of vast, open spaces with almost no cover whatsoever, separating you from the choke points, turning every second match into either a stalemate or an unrewarding meat grinder for the attackers. I think they tried to balance this openness by putting changes to the spawn system, and all they really did is put ass into asymmetry. Now Americans spawn on their squad leader just as they would in any other game in the series. Vietnamese squad leaders on the other hand need to put a stationary spawn point somewhere. This change would be fair enough if not for the fact that while as an American you can spawn literally everywhere as long as your squad leader is alive, and his back is not close to any wall or obstacle, there are more strict conditions to be met when trying to dig a tunnel. Tunnels cannot be too close to each other because fuck your team coherency. Furthermore, they cannot be too close to the objective itself, which while still unfair wouldn't be that much of an issue if not for the fact that all the normal spawns are shifted way back compared to the previous games. In RO2, spawns were about 100 to 150 meters behind the current front line. Your moves were way snappier too, meaning you didn't get that much downtime on top of your respawn cooldown. If you get unlucky, it takes upwards of a minute to get your miserably fed Asian commie to return to combat area in this title. Keep in mind that even with the guns nerfed, you still die way quicker than in other titles, and the impish movement combined with general lack of cover means that all the bullshit deaths are 4 times more frequent and also 4 times more annoying. Yup, you did the math right. It is 16 times the amount of not having fun in your digital entertainment piece. If Red Orchestra 2 reflected hectic combat of the Eastern Front, this reflects the misery of being drafted to some shithole in Eastern Asia as an 18-year-old who couldn't even legally buy himself a pack of cigarettes back home yet, just to be killed with a poo-smeared pointy stick somewhere in the jungle, and all of that before he was even able to commit his first war crime. Putting the gameplay aside, there are also less important matters to discuss about Rising Storm 2. Weapon sounds and SFX, well, it all feels done very well. Where they did, or rather where they didn't exactly show off, is the voice acting department. Let's just, for a second here, compare this...
Подходите, суки, коль не страшно! Немецкие ублюдки! Все здесь передохните! Товарищ Мико! やれるものならやってみろ! お前らに情けは無用じゃ!
Come on out, butterheads. We'll play nice.
My sister can shoot better than y'all!
To whatever this is.
Run back to Ho Chi freaking Minh, Charlie. Let's show Victor Charlie what we're made of.
You running scared, Charlie? You should be. Uncle Sam sends his regards, shitheads.
Tao sẽ giết mày. Tao sẽ giết tất cả chúng mày.
Screw you, GI! I will kill you, GI!
Digital squad leader. Foxtrot is being attacked. Stay alive, be careful, and capture an objective. Yeah!
The Vietnamese lines are the pinnacle of accidental comedy, while American lines seem overly dramatic and super tactical, Call of Duty, broken arrow, days close cheesy. If this clash of gory and gruesome depiction of death and voice lines recorded by what seems to be a bunch of try-hard airsofters isn't a textbook example of grotesque, I don't know what is. Not to mention that the way scream when you light them on fire is just the same voice line they did for the in RS1. I personally believe that implying all slant-eyed people scream the same when you burn them alive with napalm is just a bit racist, don't you think? The game is also riddled with bugs, graphical artifacts and inconsistencies. Only the last update couple of weeks ago fixed some of the cheesier spots, but I think you can still dolphin dive into a pond or a river. To explain to you why that is cheesy, normally you cannot lay down in the water and nobody expects you there. You get the perfect concealment and the only thing your enemies get is shot. While we are on the topic of what you can and cannot see, let's talk about the graphics a little, shall we? Yeah. How do you fuck up a jungle in a game about the Vietnam War? Here, grass only loads in front of you, so to give you a headache when you're trying to shoot accurately at a longer distance. But that enemy 60 meters away from you? No, he doesn't see that grass you have in your face. To his mind, you're completely exposed. From the more serious bugs that have still not been resolved, there is an effortless way you can have infinite grenades, provided your class only has 2 of them. On top of that, there are still netcode issues that will make you a literal Terminator, vanquisher of foes, clubber of seals, boss of the gym, the first of his name, etc, etc. The only thing you need to do is live the closest to the server you are currently playing on. Don't get me wrong, all of the multiplayer based games will give you an advantage if you have the lower ping, but here those differences are so pronounced it gets ridiculous at times. I also do not remember the last time I had a ping under 100 and I'm playing on European servers exclusively. What I remember though is that when I played RS1, even on the American servers, I rarely spiked out of 130 range. And even then, it was way more responsive than whatever is going on in here. And it is not just me. This issue is dating back to 2018 at least. The final nail in the coffin was ironically enough an effort to spark a new life into this game. Its free release on Epic Games Store. Poor hamsters powering the server shitted and farted and fucking died due to an influx of people from Asia that wanted to play this game at once. It was literally unplayable for a while. Epic Games release has also broken the VoIP so bad you could hear people from other servers. And sometimes the racial slurs would echo even in the picturesque mountains you can see in the main menu.
Birmingham, if you want the fucking door, come down to Smethwick Hospitality, I'll come out of my house and I'll break your fucking...
Tripwire's trifecta was gunplay, movement, and map design. Antimatter's trifecta is cock, ball, and torture, not necessarily in that order. While I was giving this game a lot of shit this whole video, I still do not think it is fair to say that it is a bad one. It is a pretty decent title, I would say. Nevertheless, it is a major disappointment considering how high was the bar raised by the first Rising Storm, and how little it took for this game to be a truly glorious title. All I, as a fan, wanted is a Vietnam reskin with maybe a couple of new, but please, at least decent maps. All I got is a graphically inferior, poorly optimized husk of the IP I could once trust with my heart and all of my money. And of course I did have a lot of fun while sinking hours upon hours into the sorry excuse of a sequel, but I feel like all that fun I got was for all the wrong reasons. It is the same fun Stalker provides if you think about it. You know, when that guy tells you to get out of there, Stalker, in a stupidly over-exaggerated and vaguely Eastern European accent. Yeah, that kind of fun. Shooting, while not being as good as in all the other Red Orchestra games, is still one of the most fun out there. If I feel like getting more fast-paced action, there are still Magoo servers that only have like, what, 10% chance of giving you malware, but 100% chance of giving you that restless shootouts you miss from Stalingrad. The biggest discrepancy between this game and its predecessor is that I could take them seriously. In fact, I met some of my best friends in Arrow 2. If you take RS2 seriously though, that just makes you an American. Need I say more? All in all, I am not saying that Rising Storm 2 is a bad game. All I'm saying is that if RS1 and RS2 had Asian parents, based on the comparison to its older brother alone, RS2 would have been disowned before it even managed to take its first piano lesson. Maybe the outsourcing gave us this nightmarish landscape where all my joy once was, and the upcoming release of 83 will end up just fine. But seeing what those Brits are doing, I would not get my hopes up. My honest advice is that you wait for a couple of months after the game releases, and then make your final decision whether it is better to support some British game, or your local drug dealer for that matter, I don't know. Think about what could give you more fun. That's all I'm saying. You are free to disagree with me, but I do hope you have enjoyed my review of Rising Storm 2. If you want to point out all the things I have misjudged or misrepresented, you have the comment section down below. If you thought this video is at least vaguely funny, show it to your friends and family so we can all spread the smiles and laughter all across the world. Don't forget to share this video and subscribe. More content will appear soon-ish, probably.